I'm a security officer, hired to protect an estate by ForestHasEyes. Hi, I'm Nolan. I've worked in this field for a long time. Well, I guess somewhat literally, but more so metaphorically. I'm sort of a private security free agent by trade, you see. Or at least, that's the sort of title that I've given myself. I'm a taller, more athletic Paul Blart, with a chip on his shoulder, an actual gun in my holster. And instead of working for an official company, I'm just some guy that gets paid by people to guard their stuff, them, or an area they want me to protect. I'm a city slicker. I like concrete, bright skyscrapers, and several hundreds of people within my general vicinity at all times. I've usually only accepted small jobs, short-time security, but recently, I got an interesting offer. A small-time tycoon, a rich guy, who looks like he's been washing his hair in liquidated money, offered me a job. Guard my plot of land, the house on said land, my son, me, all of my possessions, and get paid enough money annually to have your 401k before your hair even starts to think about turning gray. Not a bad offer, but said land was deep in the southern woods. Now you're gonna laugh. I've worked in this private security, glorified mercenary, take a gun and guard the door type of work for a while now. I've been online. I've heard enough stories. The woods aren't a place that you go to. Miles of dense wood, drowning any person alive, a place where things have dwelt for a while. The point is, if I were gonna spend a few tens of millions of dollars on a compound, dropping it dead in Missouri, is it? I know it's dead on state borders. Oh well. Dropping it in Skinwalker City woods is a bad idea. The air around here is so thick with pine trees, I swear it smells like someone is trying to blot out the new car smell with a cheap air freshener. Except the smell is more genuine. You know, when you feel the scent is so pungent, you can almost cut it with a knife. That's what it felt like when I stepped out of the man's squeaky SUV in front of his estate house, as he calls it. You know, that one place in Argentina, the one where the weird side of the internet says Hitler hid after he fled on a wild goose chase down the Atlantic? Looks similar to that. Almost identical, actually. Just give it several hundred light fixtures, shiny new windows, and a bit of trim up. Boom! There's the estate. The Kazimuth Estate House. Not a lot stood out to me. The place had a perimeter wall, which is understandable. There are a large number of threats out here, bears, wolves, even the occasional freakazoid out in the woods, that would be cause for alarm. What seemed strange to me, though, was how jagged the pikes were. The fact that they were wrapped in a whole line of razor wire and barbed wire, with light fixtures pointing outside towards the woods. A lot of money just to buy the metal for, at worst a bear or a drugged-up hippie. And a lot of power spent for what? Floodlights to see anything coming at all angles. I asked Theodore, the boy's father and my employer, and he just says it's for extra security. Fair enough, what was I gonna do? Tell him he's being overly careful? I'm the kind of guy who sleeps with 5 knives in his room, the door locked and one eye open. Still, it wasn't the security that had me on edge. It was the claw marks on the outside that to me were too violent to be from bears. So now that you know the details of my arrival, things have been weird. I know that I said I'm a city slicker. I had 3 decades in Chicago, and now I'm guarding several hundred square feet of land in the middle of the deep southern woods. Surely anyone would be unnerved. But this place, though, the town is just a few miles down the forest road. The walls of hundreds of thousands of pine trees seemingly drowning any and all in the endless veil of woods. I'm a man of this craft. Didn't always work in the private security. I like the more combative jobs. I like working in this sort of boot and collar work, the warrior mentality. I've had to deal with a lot of people, hundreds of kinds. Druggies, dumbasses. Do you know who I am's? And creepy guys sitting out by the dumpster with a boombox wearing socks, and I mean just socks. I've met all kinds. My point is, I've experienced a lot, a whole lot. So when the sun started to go down and the alarms in my head started to tick on, I know something isn't right. One of my jobs is to check the wall. It's not too bad, honestly. It allows me to get out of the house and get some fresh air. I scan the stone structure that would make East Berliners get flashbacks, and I see the lights at night. Nothing too shabby. A weekend, and I actually had to do actual maintenance on the wall as well. It was midday when I looked on the security cameras and I saw the eastern side had a spot where some sort of matted fur was caught. I didn't see it the night before, so I grabbed some tools and hopped onto the ATV to get over there. When I pried it off, I set off some alarms in my head. 1. This was a pain in the ass to pull it off because it made some body armor look like cardboard. 2. If it was this tough, how did it get punctured by the defensive wire? 3. If this was animal skin like I thought, why was the inside so dry and laminated? As, say, the underside of a carpet. But still, it had this organic look to it. Theodore said it's nothing, probably just a bear that passed by and shedded some of its fur when it got caught on the wire. But it's nearing winter time, when the fur would be growing instead of shedding. And shed fur doesn't have a layer of skin on the inside. I put it in a crate in the security room for later inspection. But do you know what's really creepy? It's not the scary stories. It's not really, well, the movie monsters. It's the things that are out of place. Now, I'm not an easily spooked man, but it's not the hobgoblin in the woods that would freak me out. It's the little girl in the middle of nowhere that scares me. I was out on a full property check. I used to do this around once every week, mostly because I was unused to the whole, well, as I said, being in the miles of suffocating trees. It's not something I'm used to. But as I got more used to it, I started patrolling the land every 2 days. I'd climb on the ATV and ride out to the gates, patrol the long, winding dirt path that the property manager agreed with whoever he bought it from to be his plot's perimeter. Usually I go, shoo off any nicks getting drunk, clear the occasional falling brush. However, this path runs deep into the woods. I don't know how much Theodore paid for this land, but it runs miles before it loops back around. Have you ever taken a walk into the woods and you feel the calm silence, so tranquil, so undisturbed? In my experience, it's like you're sitting in a canoe on a calm ocean bed, while still, all it takes for you to capsize in a fairly tame, unsafe woods is one push. One push, and you're drowning and panicking and paranoid. So, when I drove up the ATV path and stopped at what I had calculated was the most northern part of Theodore's plot, I took out my binoculars and gazed around. Calm, tall grass was growing and smothering the trunks of trees, and the trees, when you started passing the point of Theodore's land, started to grow more sparse. But there were still hundreds and hundreds of them, tightly packed together. Really, this was just an excuse for me to stop, calm my nerves of the forest, and relax. What tipped me over was when I heard someone say, "Wolf." And I don't mean it was just a dog. I mean, it was a grown man literally saying like wolf, meow, bark, in the middle of the woods. It was in the bright of the evening, and it still freaked me out. I gazed around. The noise was coming from the direction northwards, away from the property line. "Hello," I said. "Wolf," again it said. I went from cringing to just confused. "You're on private property," I said. He was off the property, technically, but like I was going to tell the creepy guy that. "Show yourself now," I said. There was a long pause and then, meow. I let out a sigh. "Come on, show yourself," I said. "Right now." What happened next made me immediately reach for my rifle on the back of the ATV, directly to the right of my ATV, pointed at the point I knew was directly north of the house, poked out a head. And I don't mean like a head, like hairy, pedophile, or something like that. I mean, who else is out here in the woods like this? No. Regardless, what poked out was a completely blank head. Have you ever seen those toys as kids where you feel the mold of that guy and pop him out? Imagine that, but a much better, more defined scale. It was a male head, stripped of hair, eyebrows, eyelashes, lips. The second it stuck out, it looked at me with what were wide eyes and dilated pupils. And without even mouthing his barely opened mouth, he went, "Coo, coo, coo." It caused me to nearly trip and fall on my ass from the shock. I scrambled to my feet and aimed the rifle over the ATV, using the small vehicle as a form of cover. Whatever this was, I said, "Come out now." "Nay," it said. In retrospect, I can now guess that he was making a horse's noise. But I thought he was saying nay in defiance, so I stood up and screamed, "Come out now or I will fire." Yes, I was the trigger-happy security guard that all those thrill-seeking teens ran into when they pushed the buttons of a rent-a-cop on duty. You can thank Iraq for that mentality. What I cannot thank Iraq for was preparing me for what the man did next. The guy crab walked, more so shuffled outward sideways. Like in 2D cartoons, how they draw the crabs? He was like that, legs wide apart, hands up in the air as claws, and that god-awful face was still staring at me. He was also naked. All I could let out was a, "What the?" I'm not gonna lie, I was in sheer disbelief. "Oink," he said, like a pig. And then he turned 90 degrees north and shuffled away at 50 miles per hour. After a few meters, he disappeared into the thick brush. I've heard him again, but I haven't seen him since, and Theodore brushing it off hasn't put my mind at ease any. It's something. It's something out there. I don't know what, though. Anyway, I started to get over seeing the random lights, the naked man, the growing claw marks on the walls. I got used to it, I guess. Then, I met Tim a few nights ago. So one night I was sitting in the security room. Essentially, the outside-facing wall is a wall of monitors. There's nothing much in the room. There's a table with a computer, mouse, and keyboard attached to the screens. There's the crate where I stuffed the bear fur along with any other things the cryptid Amazon users would buy for $300 minimum, and a chair. It gets pretty boring, actually. The log walls in here aren't furnished with layers of plywood and plaster like the rest of the place, which gives the room that piney smell and makes it strangely quiet. What broke the silence a few days ago was when I took a break from scanning the empty monitors to listen to the browser on my phone. Hey. The voice echoed through the sound of the speakers. It caused me to jump a bit too, in the dead of night, and it went from dead silence. What would you do? I quickly scanned the monitors and tried to find out the source. Hey! It went off again. There was nothing at the backside of the place, nothing in the main yard. Hey! Hey! The voice sounded like it was cracking. Then I decided to do what I should have done instead of my frantic screen searching. I checked the sound receivers and I saw that it was coming from the voice receiver at the front gate. Hey! Hey! My eyes darted to the camera overlooking the front gate to see some kind of white figure with a metal pole. Wasn't too good of a look, so I switched it to the front gate cam. And what I saw left me in surprise. Not shocked, just baffled. A science room skeleton. Yes, a science room skeleton. The metal pole was actually the wheeled rack that it was hanging off of. I sat there, surprised. I expected to see a serial killer. Seeing the white figure from a distance made my mind go into emergency mode from reading off too many Native American horror stories. But this... Hey! The voice called from the skeleton again, or at least I thought it was. It was coming from the receiver, so it could very well have just been a decoy, and someone was underneath it yelling into it. I clicked on the speaker and called back. "You're on private property," I said. A long silence followed. It was broken by, "Hey! Hey! 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 Hey!" and a dead, unmoving stare from the skeleton as it happened. What is this? Hey! Someone was trying to draw attention to the front gate. I sighed and grabbed my rifle, but considering it would also be a close distance, I grabbed the Beretta from the locker under the table as well. I passed John, Theodore's son, as I passed him, and went for the front door. "John, head upstairs, lock yourself in your room," I said. He sighed, turning his attention from playing some sort of game on his Xbox, and said, "Why?" "There's some guy at the front gate. Could be a perimeter breach. No other signs of life except for the front gate." John paused for a moment as I unlocked the door. His question caught me by surprise. "Is it a skeleton?" I stopped, locking eyes with the boy. A second of silence passed as a "hey" escaped through the slight crack in the door. "Possibly," I said. "Oh, that's just Tim." I blinked at the response, shaking my head slightly. "Tim?" "Yeah, a skeleton appears and just yells at the gate. Dad just tells me to ignore him and turn up the volume." "That's highly unsafe," I said. John simply looked confused, with a silent, "Why?" "There's a man out there screaming at the gate, causing an obvious distraction, and your dad just tells you to let it fly? It's not a person, it's a skeleton, and Dad says to ignore the things that come around during the night." It's at this point that I realized the parlor and all of the windows to the ground level rooms that were too big for simple blinds were above eye level, easier to avoid seeing the things at night. "Well, I'm gonna go talk to Tim." "Don't." This made me stop at the door because, well, the kid said the single word a lot sterner than I had had any adult speak to me in the past. What, 8 years? "Why?" I asked. "It's how we lost Richie." Now for reference, they told me Richie was a Rottweiler they had had a few years back, and he went missing. The father chummed it up to him running off after a bear. The guy was at our gate and Dad sicked it on him. I feel I knew the obvious truth, but I wasn't in the mood to hear the rest. Shaking my head as I headed out, I pressed the remote control to the gate I had clipped to my belt. I took a firing position from the porch and watched as the reinforced sheets of steel and mechanics slowly wheeled open the gate. Part of me thanks Theodore for all of the lights. The woods out here are an impermeable wall of black, suffocatingly so. So bright were the lights that it illuminated Tim even brighter than he was, but as soon as I saw him, those alarms went off in my head. You see, when the gates wheeled open, I remembered something. Tim was positioned just in front of the receiver, although it was a few meters away from it. The point is, he was off to the right of the driveway. So when the gates opened up down the middle, the pitch black walls of trees showing themselves, there it was, dead center in the middle of the gravel path. "Hey!" Tim cut off in mid-sentence when it opened wide enough for both of us to get a good look at each other. If it was a burglary distraction, this would have been long enough. and an alarm would have been tripped if a sneak entry was tried. All I saw was me aiming at what was a science classroom skeleton in the middle of the woods. I cut the pie of the gates, meaning I vaulted over the porch edge and checked slowly on the right side to see if someone was hiding. Nothing. I checked the left side. Nothing. I stopped, my rifle barrel lowered, but it was still shouldered. Now here's the thing. The floodlights were so bright, if someone tried to hide, you'd still be able to see them. The problem was, there was no one. I was staring off to the left when Tim started up again. "Hey!" I sighed and said, "What is going on?" "Hey!" It screamed again. I walked towards the gate, peeked around the corner of the wall, and stared out at him. At Tim. At this point, I did scans to the left and right side again. Still, no one, nothing, zip, nada. Just me and the skeleton. The quickly cooling night air allowed me to see my breath. I quickly gazed around, trying to see where the moon was. It was near midnight. "Narc! Narc!" I spun around and backed up a few paces. Did the skeleton just call me narc? I lowered my barrel when I realized I was aiming at a skeleton. But in retrospect, I shouldn't have been so careful. I gazed at the thing for a few moments. Just kept gazing at it. I decided to just forget it and went up to him. It was indeed a skeleton, and a bare one at that. No wires, no cameras, no voice speaker, nothing. I thought it might be built into the stand, but the pipe seemed to be hollow and didn't sound like it was coming from the metal pipe. I backed up from Tim, once again asking myself confidently what was going on. Strangely, I expected this to be the point where something jumped out and scared me and forced me to make a hasty retreat back into the compound. Estate's walls. But nothing happened. Not a shadow out in the darkness. Not a pale, white, crab-walking, back-flipping, deformed man. Not a thing. "Hey, narc! Nice scar! Nice scar! Hey, narc!" I turned my head back to Tim and then backed up a few more steps. I was staring leftwards before he said that, and on the right side of my face, there's a scar. A long gash, although it's not too noticeable if you're not close. You'd have to be close if you didn't know it was there already. And Tim was around the distance that you would need to be to see it. There were no cameras on it. How could anyone see? No speakers, so no way that someone could be speaking through it. And yet, it just gave me a compliment about a facial mutilation. "What did you just say?" I asked, sounding unintentionally offended. But I was really more stunned and confused. The skeleton, Tim, did not answer. Whatever was going on, whoever was doing this, it was just messing with me. So I parted ways with Tim with a nice crack to the skeleton's jaw, courtesy of my rifle stock, and I walked back into the compound, hitting the button on the gates to close. Between the sound of the gates closing and the engines forcing them to slide shut, I heard one more parting message from Tim. "Asshole." I went back the next day and Tim was gone. I still don't believe that a skeleton talked to me yesterday. It seems so stupid in retrospect, and yet it matched the atmosphere in a strange way. Now, it's been a few weeks, and that's some of the strangeness that I've encountered. There's been a lot going on, and I've decided to do what everyone who encounters paranormal things decides to do when they have too much time on their hands. And that's document it online. Or, well, at least, I guess, record it online. Post it. I'm getting off track. The point is, I've got plenty of things to tell, so when I get back to this, I'll make sure that you're the first to hear, so keep your ears posted.